Hi, I'm Heather Telford and I have a range of alcohol ink techniques to share with you today. I'm working in the Grafix 6x9 inch mixed media journal, working on just white craft plastic pages. I'm starting with a one color technique using moss alcohol ink and some isopropyl alcohol. My method for applying the alcohol ink for this technique is fairly random. I'm just dropping little droplets of alcohol ink and then some isopropyl alcohol and getting it to move around the craft plastic. I want to move it into those spaces between the holes for the discs, so I'm just applying a little bit more and getting it going. The important tool for this technique is this little piece of felt. I've got a Ranger applicator and just a piece of clean felt, and I'm dabbing that over and over the ink that is laid on the craft plastic. And you can see as I keep going, the ink is still very wet. So even though it creates a little bubble pattern, as it dries, it continues to move. So I'm just going to keep on working, adding a little more ink as the pattern dries, and even help it to dry a little bit with the air blower, and then apply some more ink. The longer I keep doing this, the smaller the little bubbles are, and that is the effect that I'm going for. My second technique is with two colors. I'm sticking with the moss and then adding another color. Again, just applying ink to the craft plastic. It's not going to stay in these patterns. This is just my method for laying down some ink. And then my second color is Monsoon. I'm going to move that around with the help of the isopropyl alcohol. I'm using 99% rubbing alcohol because that works really well, and then just getting it to move into those spaces between the holes for the discs, and then moving it around a little bit more with the air blower. You can see that the colors, the Monsoon and the moss mixed, and I've got a new teal color, but I want some of that original color in there as well, so that's why I added it at this point, so I don't have all mixed color. And that's about all there is to this technique, just getting the ink to move, adding it, drying it with the air blower. It's a random pattern. My third technique, I'm going to add the shell pink and go back to using a piece of felt on the applicator. This is a fun technique for creating a little bit of a plaid kind of check pattern. Because I laid the inks on the piece of felt in lines, then when I drag it across the white craft plastic, I get those lines in a row. And then to just move it a little bit more, I've added a bit of isopropyl alcohol. It's looking quite pastel, particularly that pink, so I'm adding a little bit more of the colors just to make them a little bit bolder. You can see I haven't laid down a ton of alcohol. It's not really wet. If it was really wet, it would be moving more, but I like the amount it's moving because that's what enables me to get this check plaid sort of pattern. You could keep doing this for a long time. Okay, fourth pattern, I'm adding in one more color to the three that I've already been using. This time it's slate, so it's a gray. And once more getting those inks moving together with the rubbing alcohol. They've started to blend together a little bit, but I don't want to lose the original, so I'm adding a little bit more of those colors. And I want good coverage, but I don't want all blends. So I'm trying to maintain some of those. And then just blowing them into the nooks and crannies a little with the air blower. And then as I lose a little bit of the depth of color, I'm adding a little bit more. Still just filling this panel with the blue, the grey, the pink and the green. Once I've gotten good coverage, I'm just going to lay down this stencil on the top, and you can see as soon as I drop the stencil on top, the alcohol moves to the edges of the stencil. And then I can add a little bit more color. It's hard to tell how much of the pink I've got with the stencil on top. I just add a little bit of color and then did a little bit of drying, a little bit more alcohol to move that blue around and the green, and then I let it dry for a long time. I came and checked it once before I actually took it off and it wasn't ready. I waited till it was absolutely dry. The next technique uses liquid frisket. If you haven't used liquid frisket with your alcohol inks, you can. It works well, just like it does for watercolor. So I'm simply splattering liquid frisket on, letting it dry, probably for about 15 minutes, and then doing my alcohol ink random patterns over the top. And that will give me a little bit of a snowy or sunset sort of sky with the little tiny dots of frisket masking the white of the craft plastic. I'm putting all these pages together at the end to make myself a technique sampler. So I can just remind myself and show others of different techniques that you can do with alcohol ink on craft plastic. So some of the techniques are a little bit similar, just with a bit of a twist, with adding a stencil, adding the frisket, the liquid frisket. This one I'm still using the air blower, but I'm blowing from the top down and then from the bottom up, which gives you a nice layered effect as each line kind of dries, each line of color dries. Plus I've got that added bonus of all the little dots. When the alcohol ink is totally dry, then I can remove the frisket dots. You can remove the dots of frisket with your fingers. I often do that just to get a feel for where they are, but it's also quick and easier and less messy to remove them with the liquid frisket remover. It's just like a hard eraser, and it does a really good job at pulling all those little bits of frisket off. And then I just run my hand across it at the end to make sure I haven't missed any tiny dots. Starting again in a similar way, just random dots of ink for this next technique, and putting little droplets of alcohol in them to get them moving. Still using these same colors because I want that kind of cohesion of color in the technique sampler at the end as you go from page to page. And adding a new color this time, the currant. So that's going to give me some dark red. So you can see I don't add as much of the currant because it is such a bold color. It's going to move and take over a little bit, so I don't want that. So a lot less. And then I'm using the back of the previous page to make a mirror effect, which is beautiful. And then I realize that I've got ink underneath, which will be changing the pattern on the previous page, so I get rid of that. And then if you have a look, you can see my pattern kind of face downwards as I was holding it out of the way. So it's not a perfect mirror, but I still love the effect. The final technique I'm sharing in this technique sampler journal is with a metallic alcohol ink. There are lots of pretty metallic inks, and they work a little bit differently to the straight transparent alcohol inks. So I thought I would finish with that one. I've laid down a lot of color already, started it moving with the rubbing alcohol, and now I'm adding some silver. I shook that a lot before I added any because I really want the microparticles to come out of the bottle and not be left. And then you can see how well it moves if it lands in some other alcohol ink. It has to have alcohol ink or rubbing alcohol ink to help it move around. And you can see it just shimmers across the surface of the wet alcohol ink. And I'm drying from one side and then the other to keep it moving, getting kind of waves either side, and then I'm going to have the maximum amount of silver in the center of this design. Now, any of the previous patterns you could do with a little bit of metallic in them. I just decided to leave the metallic till last, and this is my final technique for the sampler. Here are all the pages that I did. You can see keeping the color scheme similar makes it nice and cohesive, but I want to be able to see them all together. So I'm actually cutting the edges off with some edge dies from Penny Black, and then I'm going to put my journal back together so that you can see from one page to the next. I used some of those leftover pieces to cut letters using Pinkfresh Studio Heather lowercase dies, and I've cut them out of all those different patterns, and then I'm going to use Grafix Artist Tack to put adhesive on the back. You just lay all your die cuts down on the sticky piece, and then lay the cover sheet back over the top and really rub over them and kind of burnish them to get that adhesive on the backs of the letters. And then I'm going to put them on the cover. This is the chipboard cover. I painted it white, and I'm just using these die cuts from my sample pieces to create the title for my technique sampler. Any little bits of adhesive from the artist tack, I can just remove. Any extras I can remove with the frisket eraser. Before putting my pages into the journal, I just did some gel printing on the backs of the pages in similar colors so they wouldn't be stark white. And then my technique journal is complete. It's a similar style to my swatching journal, which I'll add a link to that video below. Thanks for joining me. I hope you've got lots of ideas now for trying alcohol inks on white craft plastic and maybe making it into a journal like I did.